So it was early on, it was kind of difficult. The early days of the college and the early kind of push to start the college really started with the Methodist Church, the Methodist Episcopal Church.
The Presbyterians actually tried to build here on this particular area on our land that's here before the Civil War, but General McClellan came through with his army and they stole all of the lumber and all of the materials and took it away. And so that didn't work, and later on they decided to create their school in Elkins. Education was extremely important to the Methodists as they were settling this area back in the 1800s. And so this is something that was very important to them because they would have to send them out of state. And so they were really wanting a place in the state so that their children could get a good education here, not have to go elsewhere.
They felt like they'd lost control of West Virginia University. The first couple presidents there were Methodists, so everyone was like, okay, this is great. We can send our Methodist students there and that will be fine. It will be kind of a church education. And then the third president came in and he changed things, and they were not very happy about those changes. And so they decided they needed to start a school of their own so that they could, teach their own values, instill their own values, and make sure that Methodist students in the state of West Virginia were getting the education that they wanted, and that was kind of sanctioned by the Methodist Church. So the church was the big, they were the providers of the money, the initial money, and the fundraising that took place to get the college started.
So they actually went around to all the churches, and it took them about 15 to 20 years to get all of the paperwork and the land and the buildings and all of the technical things to happen. With the Civil War, that just made what few schools that were here, made it even harder for them to operate.
The initial appeal was to try to get the seminary building built. That was the main part, that and purchasing the land. Although actually they were fortunate in that the fact that Buchanan really wanted the college to locate here, and so they actually took up a subscription, a fundraising subscription in the community to raise money. And I think they gave the college something around $6,000 as part of their appeal to say, come build your school here.
It was a mission to educate boys and girls, and that's important because at that time that wasn't normal. Girls were included from the very beginning, both as students and on the faculty. And so this is something that Bennett Hutchinson was very strong, and they brought him in to be their first president. And he was actually a Methodist minister, and in fact, all the presidents of Wesleyan were Methodist ministers up until J. Rockefeller in 1970.
So again, the Methodist Episcopal Church kind of created the committee to examine creating a conference seminary. And so a lot of those folks on the early board, what became the Board of Trustees then, were Methodist ministers. And so some of those early folks, at least in the early years of the school, maybe not always the first ones, but I'm thinking of Reverend John Rieger would be one. He was a local minister in Buchanan here, and had numerous connections throughout the Methodist Conference. He was a pretty substantial influence in getting the early seminary off the ground.
Now, Roy McCuskey you've heard of because there's McCuskey Hall named for him. He was actually a student here. And he was a student here when the fire happened. He came back as president during the 1930s, during the Depression, and was able to really make a big difference at that time. So he stayed active and his entire life. Some
of these figures, and these were folks who were known kind of and I've just mentioned a few, but I mean, these were folks who were known in other ways around the state. They were revered as leaders. They were respected, not just as church leaders, but also as civic leaders. They were involved in lots of other organizations and state government in some cases throughout the course of time. We have a lot of these folks who had substantial influence and connections across the state, and those were the folks that really kept that. And again, the folks who were in the Methodist Conference who were really invested in seeing a Methodist school take off in West Virginia.